Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Patterson. I'm from ORM Digital. I'm the Client Engagement and Delivery Director. At ORM, we design and build digital products and services. And we've been involved in hackathons for a few years. We've been involved in company hackathons and sector-specific hackathons across transport, across financial services, and across housing. I'm very excited to take part in Insight Live Week by digital leaders, and I'm here today to talk to you about a hackathon we facilitated earlier this year in the housing association sector, and we called this hackathon Pitch, People Innovating to Change Housing. So today I'm going to give you a bit of background on hackathons and what they are, and Agile. I'm going to talk about what a hackathon is and isn't. I'm going to talk about how we use hackathons to innovate and solve problems quickly. I'm then going to talk about Pitch and what we did for housing associations and the key success factors associated with that before having a Q&A and some time to answer questions at the end. So Agile and the textbook sort of definition of a hackathon is a short, intense method to bring together self-organizing and cross-functional teams to design and build working products or prototypes to solve well-defined business challenges. But to go back a step from that, really, a hackathon is actually it's an intense, short method to produce working software very, very quickly. And it's based on Agile software methodology. So I just wanted to briefly tell you how Agile came about and the problems that it's there to solve. And I'm sure some of you are very, very familiar with Agile, but I think it's worth briefly touching on it. So Agile was developed to overcome the problem that in the past, there was a high failure rate for large projects, in particular software projects. And these projects failed because sometimes it took several months or even years. And previous methods of delivering software to the business meant that the business only got that software at the end of the process. And in many cases, the needs of users or the business had moved on, and the final product didn't actually meet what the business wanted, so it was wasted time and money and energy. Agile generally works in short, what we call sprints. These are usually 1 to 4 week cycles where you get multi-skilled teams to work closely together to deliver distinct pieces of working product or software. And at the end of each short sprint cycle, you can then take that software and show it to the business. You can take that software and put it in the hand of the users or the customers or whoever you want to use it and test it. And that allows you to learn very, very early in the process, to iterate and take some of those learners back into the next sprint cycle so that you can redefine, reprioritize, and the project can become agile and moves through different stages where you're delivering and building on that initial product, but you're always iterating, you're always evolving the product based on the feedback that you're getting. And the reason we use multi-skilled teams in this type of approach is, this isn't just about software development. Agile and hackathons are not just about software developers. The reason we use multi-skilled teams is to be ensure that we cover all the relevant areas that we need to improve the chance of success of the final product. So we need to really understand the needs of the users. In this case, these could be customers, they could be internal users. In the case of housing associations, they could be residents. And we want the users to use the product. So we want this to be a desirable product that they want to use. We obviously have to consider the needs of the organization or the business. Is this a viable product that delivers business value? In most cases, there needs to be a business case behind developing a digital product for a business. So it needs to be viable for the business. And then technology, is this feasible? Can it be built within any technical constraints we do or don't have? All of these things need to be considered. So you need people who can actually look at all of those areas as part of the process in Agile and in a hackathon. So why do we do Agile? It mitigates the risk of us building unwanted products because we're constantly looking and iterating. It delivers working products quickly and early so that we can get it into the hands of the business and users. In Agile, another really important thing is that we prioritize work over documentation or anything else, really. We want people to spend the time building things, not spending their time writing down what they might build in the future. And we want people to learn and prioritize as we iterate and as we produce software that comes out of each sprint. So we want to look at what we're building. We want to make sure it's right as early as possible in the process. And we want to keep looking at it through the process. And as we learn more about what users want. We iterate that, we feed that back into the process, and we change, we evolve, and we prioritize. So as I said, a hackathon is effectively, it's a shortened version of an agile sprint, where you get a multi-skilled team together to solve a real business problem, and you want them wherever possible to build a working prototype or product out of that. The problem should represent a real business problem. It should be well defined. It shouldn't be too big that it can't be solved in a day or 2 days or however long the hackathon is. Generally 1 or 2 days is normal for a hackathon. And it's important to understand that hackathon is not about software developers and no one else. It's not about software developers being locked in a room with pizza and beer or whatever else. It's actually, you're not going to deliver the best product or working solution. Those guys obviously have great skills and they can build great products, but they may not understand the users who are going to use the product. They may not understand their challenges. They may not understand the business problem that we're trying to solve. So we need people who understand that to get involved in the process. So when it comes to hackathons, we need a team that's going to work together. We need a team that's going to understand the problem. We need a team that's going to understand the problem to be solved for the business. We need a team that's going to understand the users of the final product, whether they're internal or external, and what their challenges are. We obviously then also need people who can design the product from a visual perspective and a user perspective. We need people who, from technology who can build the product as well. So we need that good mix of people. But it also helps to have internal people because they are the closest to your business. They understand the problem better than anyone else. But it's good to have external people on the team as well, because those people will not have preconceived ideas about what is and what isn't possible within your organization or your sector. And they will challenge the accepted norms. So it's really good to have a good mix of people across all of those skills. And ideally in a hackathon, 5 to 6 people is about the right number for a team. In agile software development, the norm is 5 to 9 people, which is fine. And 5 to 6 people is a good number for a hackathon because it's a right amount of people to where they can self-organize and manage themselves in a day or two. It's enough to have the right mix of skills. And it's enough to get things done. If you get much bigger than that, if you start to get into 8 or 9 or 10 people, the group can sort of splinter off into different smaller groups, etc. And you don't really want that to happen. So 5 or 6 people, I think, is the right number of people. However, if you do have a hackathon and you can't get to 5 or 6 people, you need to have 7 or 8 or whatever. That's fine. You can make it work. 5 or 6 people is just kind of the ideal. So when you bring all this together, the benefits of a hackathon are that you can solve problems really quickly because everybody you need to solve that problem is in a room with everything they need to solve the problem. You can deliver tangible products that bring the idea to life much more than any other presentation can. It's much more powerful to have a working prototype than it is to have a PowerPoint or any other sort of form of communication. And you can get that working prototype into the hands of real users in real life situations to test it and to learn from it and to move forward to potentially design and building a fully fledged product. And another benefit is that you can educate people across your organization or even across the industry because people are learning new ways of working. They're learning more about their colleagues, or they're learning more about the challenges that their colleagues have. And they're learning from working with different people from inside their organization, from inside the sector, from outside the sector. And hopefully they can take some of this learning away and apply it to the day-to-day job. So, moving on to the Housing Association hack that we did earlier this year, is called Pitch People Innovating to Change Housing. This was a sector-specific hack. It involved multiple organisations within the Housing Association sector. We looked at industry-wide problems, and we wanted to produce working prototype in a day in the 8 hours that we had. And we wanted those results then to take forward. The reason we called it People Innovating to Change Housing was actually to allay any fears people had about hackathons. Hackathon is not a well-known terminology and sometimes not well understood within that sector. So we wanted to use a different name to make it a bit clearer what it was about, and it wasn't just about technical people, really. So this hackathon involved on the day 30 people from 6 housing associations. We had 4 challenges that we wanted to take on. There were 4 teams that participated. We had 8 hours to solve the problems, and at the end of the day, we wanted to award one winner for the solution that they delivered. This was the culmination of several months of work, actually. It doesn't just happen in a day. And I'll talk a little bit later in this presentation about some of that preparation. But it was a hugely enjoyable and intense day for everybody that was involved. And we had participants from housing associations, from subject matter experts, from the repairs and their customer service teams who understood the challenges to be solved, and the contact center people who actually talked to residents and tenants, so they really understood the frustrations of those people. We also had user experience, design and development people. Some of those came from the housing association, some of the housing associations themselves, but some of those also came from external organizations like us at ORM. Microsoft, who supported us with this event, provided some people as well. And there was also some external people, some software people from universities. So we tried to get as many people involved from inside and outside the sector. And on the day, as well as the team solving the challenges, we had some advisors, and those advisors were a mixture of housing association people who understood the problems that had been set, the challenges that had been set, and who could answer specific questions about that if teams had them, as well as having other advisors who understood this process and could help the teams move forward if they got stuck, or if they didn't know how to overcome a specific challenge, or if they wanted just some advice on how to move things forward. There was people there on hand throughout the day to answer any questions that they had. And then finally, there were some judges there as well who participated in the day. They got to see what the teams were doing. They also got involved in interacting with the teams, and they were a mixture of housing association people and some external people, and they were there to judge the final solutions at the end of the day. And on the day, we very, very quickly briefed the teams in the morning in 10 or 15 minutes. And we'd actually formed the teams prior to the event. I'll talk about that in a second. But we, on the day, we gave the teams the space and the facilities all that they needed to get on with the task. We ran this in Microsoft's offices in the campus in Reading, and they provided a really, really great space. Each team had enough space for themselves. They had table, they had screens, they had flip charts, they had markers, they had lots and lots of sticky notes, all the stuff that they would need to get on with the problem. We kept them fueled throughout the day we provided breakfast when they arrived, we provided tea, coffee, water, soft drinks throughout the whole day. We delivered lunch to them so they didn't have to leave the space, they could continue working, and it was a really intense period. We provided the support they needed for the advisors who were there on the day should they have any questions. And then at the end of the day, the teams presented their solutions. They each had about a 10-minute presentation, and they presented to the whole group. And then after that, there was some judging and an award of the winner. So I'll just give you a little bit of a flavour of how the day went and some of the feedback from the participants on the day.
We're here today in our lovely Microsoft offices running this hackathon. IRM have done an excellent job today of bringing together what is talked about a lot in the industry, but I don't know if is always successfully achieved, which is multiple housing associations working together on common goals and hacking out ideas to achieve and overcome these issues.
We've brought together industry experts from across the housing sector, along with designers and developers to solve actual industry challenges. We've got 4 challenges to solve today, we've got 30 people, and we've got 8 hours. And at the end of the day, we'll have working prototypes that solve real problems for housing associations today.
So today's pitch is all about looking at our customer problems, how to solve them. So really pleased to be involved in this, bringing together a whole skill set of different people to look at it from the customer's perspective. And I think it's really, really exciting that we're doing it this way and being so customer centric.
We are working today to build My Home, an extension of an online portal which allows customers to track the progress of their repairs.
We'll be looking at how you can essentially diagnose a repair for a housing association property and using a bot in order to assemble the diagnosis for that and to get us to be able to delegate that very specifically to engineers so that the housing association has less work that they need to essentially do.
We are creating an app or widget that's going to be used for residents to report different grounds maintenance issues, and we're also going to be able to tell residents whether those issues have been reported before and potentially how long it's going to take to do that, which should then stop lots of incoming calls from multiple residents about the same issue.
We are working on the meal ordering system within Extra Care. Currently it's all on paper, so we're just trying to work out if there's a way, maybe an app or a web-based ordering system to allow residents to do that easier and more efficiently for the kitchen staff as well.
So that was a few thoughts from the people that were involved in the hackathon, and hopefully you got a sense of what the guys were doing on the day and the sort of activities that they were doing, and that they were all excited to be solving real problems and working with their colleagues as well as sort of new and interesting people to do that. So prior to the day, we had worked with housing associations to set the challenges, and these are the 4 challenges that we set. So the first one was about meal ordering at care schemes, and this was currently a manual paper process, and we wanted to engage tenants more in this process, and we wanted to automate this process to an extent so that we could save some time and money from doing that. The second one was about grounds maintenance reporting, and we wanted to make it easier for tenants to report grounds repair, and we wanted those reports to be more accurate, because this would save time and money and duplication, of which there were, it come up from multiple housing associations that this was a challenge for them. The third one was about better diagnosing tenant repairs, and we wanted, in this case, we were keen to focus on more accurate information being passed to contractors. There were errors and wasted site visits that some of the housing associations involved had articulated, so we wanted something that would solve that problem. And the final one was keeping tenants informed about repairs. Tenants were frustrated at times when they don't know what's happening around the repair, and that meant there was extra phone calls and extra staff time dealing with tenants on the phone. So we wanted a way to communicate with them. So all of these were set in advance of the day, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation about how we did that. But then on the day, we also wanted to judge these, as I mentioned before. So the elements that we judged it on was around. We asked each team to present a short presentation at the end of the day, but when we asked them to make sure they covered these elements. So we wanted the business case or the proposition, how well did this deliver value to the business, how well did it solve the problem, the concept, how well did it engage with whoever needed to engage with this solution and make sure that it actually did solve the problem. From a design perspective, was it designed well for the users that it was intended to? And then finally, we wanted a demo of the working prototype, so as much as possible to see something working. And actually, I'm going to take you now through the winning solution on the day, which was actually number 2 about reporting grounds maintenance issues, where we wanted to make it easier for customers to understand it, what was happening on the estate, to prevent jobs being raised in error or duplication, and where jobs are raised, we wanted to know exact locations. We wanted to validate the job and make sure that everybody else that needs to know about it was aware of the issue. And the problem that we're trying to solve was kind of multifaceted. From a staff perspective, or from a housing association perspective, there was too many calls about the same issue. Multiple people were reporting the same issue. When that issue was reported, it wasn't always clear what the issue was or where the issue was. People were describing it on the phone, but that led to errors or inaccuracy. Sometimes there were stressful and unpleasant calls to staff because residents were getting a bit irate, or they were unhappy for some reason that they didn't know what was going on, or they didn't feel that it was being addressed. So this led to stressful calls for staff, and those staff in the contact centre were being taken up by these calls when they could potentially have been doing something else if that repair had already been reported and it was in progress in some way. And from a resident perspective, they may be paying grounds maintenance fees, but they weren't clear how that was being spent. It's also frustrating for residents when the phone lines are busy and they can't get through. And finally, it's also when residents report an issue, they weren't always known when they were going to be fixed, so they were becoming frustrated by that as well. So this solution was designed to make it easier to report problems. They wanted to make it easier for residents to understand what is or isn't a problem. They wanted to reduce calls to staff, to the contact centre. They wanted to reduce duplicate issues being taken up by staff in dealing with those issues. They wanted to reduce staff stress from difficult and challenging telephone calls with residents. And we wanted to reduce call-outs to the wrong location. So the team set out, they kind of reframed the problem in this way, and this is what they wanted the problem to do. And at the outset of the day, what the team actually did was they mapped out the user flow, how a user might report a problem. And by doing this, they understood what the solution needed to do. They could focus on the key items that needed for the user to accurately and efficiently log a repair. And they were able to exclude anything that distracted them from the key task. And this is really important because sometimes in these types of events or in similar events where you want to prototype something, it can be easy for teams or individuals to get carried away and try to do too much. This team did a really, really good job of focusing on the key things, the key pieces of information that were needed to get a problem reported and get somebody out to fix it, you know, and they cut out everything else so they could really focus on solving this problem in a day. And they also looked at things in the back end, like the technologies to be used and the sort of database that they would use to actually capture information. And then they designed a solution, and they designed a solution using that user flow following 16 screens. Now, I'm not, rather than show you the screens, I'm actually going to talk you through the solution. So this is the prototype that the team developed on the day. And they developed this in an application called Marvel. It's a really good application for this type of thing. It's used quite a lot by when designing, you know, digital products and services, because you can quickly take visual design and turn it into a kind of clickable prototype to bring something to life much, much better than you could in any other way. So the team had designed this solution to be a web application, so something that you could go to on your mobile phone. You don't have to load a mobile phone app onto your phone. You go to the internet and you would come to this. It's designed specifically, you know, for, you know, or optimized for mobile, and people would go to this screen, and the welcome screen say, you know, welcome, we will guide you through the process of reporting grounds maintenance. You click start, and then it asks to allow your location data on your phone, which you would allow. It then pops up with a map showing where you are, and you click on the map, say where I am, and you say, okay, what type of issue would you like to raise? It gives you a list of the issues that are already raised in the area. So if you're going to raise a problem around graffiti behind the bins, you can see that that problem is already raised, and you can see that it's been classed as non-offensive. If you want to look at grass cutting, you can see that that's been scheduled for Tuesday, the 29th of the month. So you can see that problems have been raised, and that and when those problems are going to be fixed. So if that's one of the problems you're going to report, you don't need to report it. So therefore, we reduce the duplication here. But actually, I want to raise a new issue. And the issue that I would like to raise is that I'm going to raise the issue of an abandoned vehicle. So I click issue type. It comes down with a drop down of the key issues that we want to be reported in this way. We select abandoned vehicle, and then asks me for some details around the number plate, the type of vehicle, etc. But what could be a better way than making sure it's very, very clear which abandoned vehicle I'm talking about than to take a photo? So we take a photo using our mobile phone of that abandoned vehicle. We then add any other details we like, and we continue. Then we add about the issue details. How long has it been there? Is it obstructing access? Is it hazardous? In this case, that's no. And then we simply submit it, and it says your report has been issued, has been submitted. Do you want to report anything else? And in this case, no, I don't. And it takes me back to the welcome screen. So you can see from that solution, and that was the solution that the team designed on the day and built on the day for this problem. Did we make it easier to report the problem? Yes, we did. We're using a web application, and no phone calls were needed. It was a very simple process for the user to follow to report that problem. Did we make it easier for residents to understand what isn't a problem? Yes, we did. There was a drop down that showed issues that were already to show the issues that could be reported, and there was a list of the issues that were already there. Did we reduce calls to staff? We did. There was no calls needed, which was great. As I mentioned, we reduced the duplicated issues because you wouldn't report an issue that was already reported. We subsequently can reduce staff stress then, because we don't have those challenging phone calls. It's all done through the web application, and we used the mobile phone technology around location data, and that makes sure that we reduce call outs to the long location, because the item is identified clearly on a map. So we solved the problems that we set out to do, and this was the reason that this team won. They clearly understood what the problem was. They clearly solved the problem with their prototype, and they gave a demo of a great prototype that you can see could be quickly then taken forward by a housing association and built out into a fully fledged product. And overall, the day was a huge success for everybody involved. Everybody enjoyed it, and all the teams solved the problems that they were given on the day. And some of those problems are now being, some of those solutions, sorry, are now being taken forward by housing associations. And from our perspective at ORM, what do we see as the main achievements of the day? Well, we mobilised multiple housing associations and multiple departments within some of those housing associations to take part, which was great. We set and solved real sector problems that housing associations were experiencing. So that was really, really good for us that we were able to do that. And we delivered working prototypes in a single day. And it never fails to astonish me how much people can achieve when you actually put the right people together in the right environment. People generally can produce great solutions to real challenges. And we educated people from different departments and from different housing associations, and hopefully they learn new skills that they can take back to the day-to-day job around, working collaboratively, innovation, etc. So all in all, we feel it was a huge success. But as I said, it just didn't happen on the day. The actual process of planning and preparation actually took several months. And one of the first things we did at the outset was we set up a steering group that came together to understand the sector issues and set the challenges. And that steering group was made up of housing associations. And the steering group helped us create awareness across the sector and ensured that we got the right people involved at the right times, and we got the right people involved in the hackathon itself. And in addition to creating awareness and driving things forward, the steering group met to ideate and build out the challenges that we wanted to set. And setting the challenges is crucial. It's one of the most important things that we have to do for a hackathon. The challenges have got to be solvable. It's a big area of risk for a hackathon. If you make a challenge too big, it can become insolvable. And the teams will just struggle on the day and you won't get through it. So you've got to. Our role in that was facilitating the housing associations in setting the challenges to make sure that the challenges lent themselves to actionable solutions, and we broke them down into challenges that we were sure we could solve in a day. And there's a number of things we can do to achieve that when it comes to challenge setting. We also did a bit of education. There are often misconceptions about what a hackathon is, as I mentioned earlier. So in this case, we ran a webinar. You could do this face-to-face if that was appropriate for the organisations. We had housing associations in different parts of the country, so we decided that our webinar was the best way to do this. And we ran it with stakeholders and potential participants, and really anybody that was interested. And what we wanted to do with this was to just tell people what a hackathon is and what it isn't, to set their expectations, to allay any fears they had. We wanted as many people as possible to get involved. We wanted people with those multiple skills I talked about, people who understood the problems, who understood their housing association and how things worked, as well as people who could come at this from a different angle, and who could bring design skills and development skills, as well as an internal and external perspective. And we wanted to allay the fears that those people had and any misconceptions they had. We also wanted to get buy-in from the wider organisations, just so that everybody understood what it was we were doing and how we were planning to achieve it. As I mentioned, with the Steerco, we set the challenges. These challenges were set by the housing associations themselves. And it's worth noting here, we've been through the challenges already, but it's worth noting here that other than number one, meal order and extra care schemes, all of the challenges set were around the repairs process. And this came up very, very early in the process, working with the housing associations to go through what challenges we should set. And what we ended up doing is breaking down the challenge of repairs. Repairs is a big area that almost all housing associations have to deal with. It's an area of high cost, so there's potential for inefficiency there. So we wanted to, look at that. We wanted to break it down into the areas where we felt we could have the biggest impact in terms of the value to the housing association, but making sure that, the problems were small enough that they could be solved on the day. And there's quite a lot of work and effort went into, working with housing associations to get to that point. And then when we defined those business problems, we wanted to pitch those problems to the participants so that the participants themselves could decide what problems they wanted to try and solve. So in this case, we ran a breakfast briefing. It was about an hour and a half, a couple of weeks before the event. As I mentioned, the housing associations pitched their challenges and ideas to the teams. And then they could also they could answer any questions the teams had directly. Now, we ran this in advance of the day. You could do this on the day of a hackathon if you're going to run, say, a 2-day hackathon and you've got more time. Because we were running a 1-day hackathon and we wanted those 8 hours to be, given as much time as possible to looking at solving the problems, we ran this in advance to save us a bit of time. But then also, what this did help us to do is get the teams invested. So once the problems had been pitched to the teams then self-selected around the problems that they wanted to solve, and they came up with 4 teams for the 4 problems. Now, we may have not had one-to-one correlation there, and that doesn't really matter. It's not, it was just coincidence really that we had 4 teams and 4 problems. We're running another hackathon now with a big financial services organization, and they've got 2 problems, and they'll probably have 10 teams, so we'll probably have 5 teams looking at each problem, and that's not an issue. In fact, it's good to have multiple teams looking at the same problem, because they will come up with different solutions, which is always interesting. In this case, the teams formed around the problems. They self-selected. And another benefit is that they were invested in the hackathon itself. They formed the teams. They were less likely to drop out of the, in advance of the day, which is a positive thing. And then the key success factor. So, we went through this process. We had the hackathon. We delivered working prototypes. In our opinion, in ORM's opinion, what we believe led to the success of the actual hackathon event itself was that we were solving real problems that were set by housing associations, and that, so the people that were participating from housing associations recognized that there was real value in solving those problems. And we made sure that those problems are not too big to be overwhelming, and that the teams could provide actionable solutions. So the work in advance to get those problems right was well spent. Also, the teams, having the right mix of teams, we had a really, really good mix of people from housing associations who understand the problem and who understood the needs of residents. We had a good mix of people from inside housing associations and externally, who, from a user experience, from a design perspective, and from a development perspective, who could also challenge the norm. So we had that right mix of people, and we had kind of the right size teams as well. And then the final one was about setting up the steering group. If we hadn't, we needed that steering group to get buy-in, to help us engage the wider group, to help us engage housing associations, and to push it forward to set the right challenges. And, that was a huge part of the success as well. And so hackathons are really, they're a method of innovation. They're a process to get to innovation, and a really, really useful one. And in our experience, they can be really, really successful. And we think most organizations should consider hackathons for a number of reasons. They solve business problems quickly. We talked about that already, or I've talked about that already. Everyone you need to solve the problem is in the room, has everything they need to solve the problem, and is focused on delivering actionable solutions. And that is really, really powerful. And as I said earlier, it never fails to astonish me how much people can achieve when you give them the right environment to achieve it. It actually creates a buzz within your organization or within the industry, in this case with housing associations, and it gets people excited about what they're doing. It's something different from the day-to-day job. So it's attractive, and it's something people want to get involved in. It's also attractive to people from outside of your sector or your organization. If you're trying to hire people, it's a really, really positive thing to say. It shows that you are an innovative and forward-thinking company, which is really, really good. Something that's really, really important is it provides an environment to take risks and to fail sometimes. A lot of organizations don't do that. People perceive failure is a bad thing. People don't want to fail. A hackathon is a short, sharp, intense way where you can give people that environment to take risks and to fail. And you know, if you ran a hackathon and you had, you know, 4 or 5 teams all running the same problem, you'll get different solutions to that problem, and you might not want to take all of them forward, but the process of getting there is valuable, and the time and the cost that it takes to get there is not much in comparison to trying to run, you know, a fully fledged software project to try and solve that problem, which at the end, if you haven't run it in the right way, you may not get the right results. And it also improves team skills. Everybody involved, whether they're internal or external, is learning new skills and new things from working with the people that they're working with. So they can take these skills back to their day job, and you know, and that adds value to organizations generally. And the overall process we took to get through this hackathon, this is just really a summary of it, and we've talked about all of this already. It did take, you know, several weeks to do the preparation and make sure that we had all the right people in attendance. But really, in summary, establishing the steer code gets buy-in and drives it forward. The education ensures that everybody has a common understanding of what the hackathon is, and gets buy-in from the wider group. Defining the business problems is crucial, as I mentioned already, to make sure that the challenges are solvable in a day and that those solutions will add value to the business. In this case, pitching to the teams and forming the teams, we did it in advance, but it can be done in a day. That's important, that you get the people involved, you have the right mix of people on the teams, and they self-select around the challenges you want to solve. Then, of course, there's the actual hackathon itself, which, you know, could be 1 to 2 days, could be even longer in some cases, maybe up to a week. But you know, 1 to 2 days we think is a good amount of time. And then after the event, you will have prototypes, and those prototypes can be taken to the business to, you know, to articulate the solution to the problem, and can be given to users in real life scenarios so that you can test and learn and iterate upon them, and hopefully build them out to fully fledged products ready to launch. So I just want to say something about ORM here quickly. We're 20 years old this year, and we are very excited about hackathons. We see that they're a great way to innovate. They're a great way to make things happen. They're a great way to solve business problems, and you know, you get there really, really quickly, and you learn a lot in that very short, intense process. So yeah, we're offering, in the run-up to the festive season this year, we're offering 50% off hackathons. So if you're interested in that, then please, you know, let us know. So that's it in terms of presentation. So we've got some time now for questions and answers. So we've been getting some questions in as we come along. So the first question we got is, what's the split between the number of participants and advisors and judges at hackathon? Very good question. So at this hackathon, I think we had 5 advisors, and that was split between, there was a couple of advisors there from the housing associations who could advise on the problems that we're trying to solve, and there's a couple of advisors from ORM and from Microsoft as well, who could help around the process in terms of moving forward, taking on the challenges of the teams that had any challenges in the day, or if they were going in the wrong direction, or if they're trying to solve too big a problem, we could help and advise them around that. So I think 4 or 5 is good. I think having, you know, a sort of 1 advisor per team is probably about right. The advisors can move between teams, but that makes sure you've always got somebody available to answer questions. From a judge's perspective, we wanted the people that the housing associations that had set the challenges were on the judging panel. So the people that had set the problems in the first place were there, as well as external people who could judge the solutions on, you know, the different merits that we wanted to judge it on in terms of the prototype, the design, etc. So we had 4 judges there. So we had people representing the solutions to be solved, as well as some external people. And I think that's about right. That was 4 judges. That was 4 judges in total, and we looked at all of those problems. I think if you have a lot of problems, a lot of different challenges that you're trying to solve, you might want to have a different judging panel of, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 people for each. But I think 4 people's enough as a maximum for a judging panel, because you don't want to spend too much time deliberating. You just want to understand really how well have they solved the problem and get to a decision as soon as you can. And people want to know, actually, through judging, who's the winner on the day. And it's been a very long day, so you don't want people to be hanging around too long. Good question here about how you can make a hackathon work for the company rather than a sector-wide one. And there is differences between company and sector-wide hackathons, actually. So this is a good question. So I think you can make a hackathon work for your company. We are doing it with an organisation now. I mentioned earlier we're working with one of the banks to do an internal hackathon, which we're running in a couple of weeks. So yeah, actually the process to be followed is similar in that you want to engage, you know, a steering group of a small number of people. It's probably smaller than you would need for a sector-wide one. So for a company, you just need, you know, the key people who are going to help you drive it forward and engage the different departments. You do need to set challenges that are going to be really solvable. So whatever those challenges are, you need to make sure that somebody representative of them is involved early, so that you can get to a point of defining those challenges well and making sure that those challenges are solvable in a day. We'd recommend that you make sure that you've got the right mix of skills involved for a company-wide hackathon, and that means just, you know, having a view. You're going to have the people that understand the problem and understand how you work as an organisation. What you may have, a lot of companies, you know, have digital teams nowadays is people who can do the design and the development type work and the user experience work. If not, that can be supplemented with an external company like us or like anyone else who does this type of thing. So typically, you know, if you don't have the right mix of skills around some of those, you know, design and development area, we can provide those people to get involved. So it's the same type of process. And from a sector, from a company specific perspective, it works really, really well. And I know there's also been company specific, organization specific hackathons in the housing association sector, so you can just focus really on your own problems, and as long as you've got enough people to participate, then you can absolutely make it work. And I would say, you know, you don't need 30 people to run a hackathon. One team against one problem is actually all you need. You know, ideally you probably want to make it a little bit bigger than that and get, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 teams involved, but it's not absolutely necessary to do that. You can do it with as many people as you know, as long as you've got one team of 5 or 6 people, somebody that understands the business problem and somebody to help them through the process, then you can run a hackathon for a company really effectively. And also that, you know, related to that, it's worth saying, I think, that we ran this for housing associations as a sector specific hackathon. We wanted to innovate in this sector. Obviously, housing associations are public sector, so it lent itself to do this in this sector because the housing associations generally aren't in competition with each other. They generally have common problems, so we could develop common solutions. And as they're, you know, part government funded and, you know, not for profits, you know, there's a huge sector-wide benefit that multiple organisations can take some of those solutions forward. So you know, it would work really, really well in the public sector. We've also been involved in the transport sector around some of the hacking in the rail industry, and whilst they are in competition to an extent, that sector still likes to shape. They have common challenges, and some of those challenges affect all of them, and some of those challenges are around sort of services that are provided by government bodies and stuff. So there is a sort of a public sector aspect to it, but they are also willing to share challenges and solutions to help move the industry forward as a whole, which I think is, you know, shows really good thinking, because ultimately, if you do this at a sector level, even if you're in competition with some of those with some of the others involved, it's going to move your industry forward. I've got another question now about key success measures. What would you say are the biggest challenges for the teams to succeed? I'd say the biggest challenges that teams have is making sure that they have the right people involved, as I mentioned already, but also that they keep focused. And that's actually part of the job of the advisors, or sometimes we call them coaches on the day, as well as being there to answer questions, having them move in, you know, mingle with the teams and interact, and just to be there as a sort of sanity check to make sure that they're moving at the right progress. If you've only got a day for a hackathon, if you haven't, you know, started building a prototype, you know, at some point early in the afternoon, it means you're probably not going to get there. So you need to make sure that they're on track. If they've not started their presentation, you know, by an hour before they're supposed to present, they're probably not going to have the presentation ready. So making sure you mingle and interact and understand where they are without, you know, letting the teams get on with it, but just giving them a bit of advice and making sure that they keep on track. Understanding where they're going and making sure that they're not trying to solve too big a problem is always key as well. Some of the challenges that we had on this day, around the repairs process, there was quite a bit of interaction between the advisors as they mingled with the teams to, you know, the teams naturally want to try and solve as much as possible, and sometimes you have to pull them back in and say, no, that's great, but you know, you've got a limited amount of time. Just focus on this. Maybe just consider focusing on this, because you're much more likely to get there, to get a working solution if you do, than trying to focus on this, that, and the other. So that, I would say, is one of the biggest challenges for the teams to succeed. Time runs away when you're in such an intense environment. Time runs away very quickly. So making sure the teams keep focused is really, really important. Another question around what's the ideal length of time for a hackathon. In this case, we did 1 day. Sometimes I would say that 2 days is probably the ideal time for length of time for a hackathon, because that's enough time to really understand the problem and really flesh out a solution and deliver a prototype, a working prototype for some level. In a lot of cases, in our experience, it's quite hard for organizations to allow people to give up the time to do this type of thing for 2 days. So 1 day is still really, really doable. And by doing some of the prep and having the sort of a shorter pre-event, that really helps make sure that you can really still achieve in 1 day. So 1 or 2 days is the norm. I think very few companies would probably do it for any longer than that. I think that is all the questions. So thank you very much, everybody. My name is Peter Patterson. If anybody wants to contact me, it's peter.patterson@ormdigital.com. Happy to answer any further questions about today. Happy to answer any questions you have about hackathons generally, or how it might apply to your organization or whatever. No obligation. I'm just, you know, I love hackathons. I love how much you can achieve in a day, and you know, the more organizations do this type of thing, the more we can innovate, the more we will, you know, we will move organizations forward in digital. So it's a really exciting thing for me, and I love to talk about it. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to. And thank you, everybody, for listening.